Welcome everybody to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here on Black Star Network. And we are continuing our series, our part 2 of putting in the work on author's journey. And we're putting a little spin on it because some of you also desire to be speakers. Today, we are joined by the amazing group who will always be with us to continue to help us figure out where we're going, what we need to do, and how to get there, not only using balance, but also determining when enough is enough. And you need to turn the tide and start in a different direction. We're joined today by Linda Griffin, Dr. Tierney, Charlotte Avery, and Catrice Nolan. Welcome in, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello. I am excited that y'all are here. Last week, we started our conversation and ended our conversation with trying to figure out what do people do who want to be in the author space. And each of us writes for different reasons and different purposes. So I want to start off by, just asking this one simple question. And I know it's going to be loaded because people are like, oh, I never thought about that. What was the reason that you decided to write? When did you know that you needed to do a book? How does that come to each of you? And, what was your process like? I'll start with Dr. Tierney. Yeah, you.
So you guys heard me tell you last week how I lost my boot job. And that was kind of the catalyst that led to me writing a book. But I actually had a dream, a desire of writing a book that started when I was a child. Okay, so when I was a little girl, we'll say probably like 7, 8, I knew I had something to say. Now, what I had to say, I don't know. My granddad, I'll tell you, I love to talk. And I just wanted to write a book. I didn't know what that book was about, but anybody who would listen, I would tell them, I'm going to write a book, And so I tell you that because a lot of times we think about books as just, it's just something that I do or something that I did. But writing a book can actually be a calling. It could be connected to something that God put on the inside of you very, very young, very, very early, or even in our later years. I didn't know anything about the author process, but I knew at 7, 8 years old that I was going to write a book. And over time, it changed. When I was in higher education, it was going to be a textbook. And I had this layout for this amazing textbook on enrollment management and, all of that. And then once I lost that job, somewhere along the way, I actually forgot about my book. I actually forgot about that dream. But while I was sailing the SS depression and laying on my couch and Lord, why did you do this to me? And going through all the hitting every rung on the emotional ladder, God said to me, don't you remember how you always used to say you wanted to write a book? I put that there. Now let's talk about this book. And you guys heard me say, I was like, sir, I need to book me a job, not, write a book. I threw that thing in the corner, but he brought it right on back to the forefront. And so that was kind of how I ended up writing my first book.
I think that that's a powerful story, Dr. T, because everybody is searching, for that space. Charlotte, what was your single most reason?
My single most reason for writing was because I just felt like there are things that people don't talk about that people really need to know. And especially as a wife and a mom. I mean, you guys know that I have seven children, but I just learned in my motherhood journey and my woman journey that there are things that we don't talk about that are just so taboo. And for me, I'm just like, well, we need to talk about it because anything that you're going through, somebody else is going through, even though they're not talking about it. And so I just started writing and putting it out there. But like Dr. Tierney, when I was younger, when I was in elementary school, I always knew that I wanted to write. I knew I was writing poems. I was doing a lot of things. I just had no idea that when I wrote my first book, that it was going to be about motherhood. I didn't know it was going to be about, all the things that I'm writing about now that really empower me, empower women, empower children. And so it's really my calling to do that as an author, as a speaker. And I just love it. It moves me, it drives me, it compels me to really hear the thoughts and voice of women and children and be able to speak to that.
Thank you for sharing, because as you stated, we all come from different places, whether it's something God, says like, look, I've been saying, you're like, but I don't think I have anything to say. And then you realize I have a voice and I want to use it for a great cause and a great reason and purpose. And Catrice, even with your writing, and you shared with us somewhat of your story in your writing, how did it move you and prepare you, to continue on your journey? Because you wrote after the fact. And how did you come to your place of knowing this is what you wanted to do in this season of your life?
I came to know about that, Jackie, because it was me sharing about my journey with others and them learning that there were so many other resources available to them, others who were going through cancer or perhaps a loved one that they just didn't know. And it was extremely shocking to me that in some instances I was going to the same hospital that they were going to, but for some reason I was knowledgeable. I had learned about resources that were available to me, but that other person, same location, did not. And I thought, how many other people are not being made aware or don't know what questions to ask as they're going through their cancer journey in terms of the support that they need? And so it was continuously hearing that question, having those discussions that led me to, you know what, we have to put some of this information in books because, with knowledge is power. And I want people to be empowered when they're going through their cancer journeys.
Mm. Oh, that is a journey that many have faced, and some are wondering if they ever will, and some will ever not. But what you write about, we're all alongside people who go through that journey. And, Linda, as a writing coach, you guide many people through this process. And, as an author yourself and as a writing coach, how do you help people find their single most powerful or important reason for wanting to write? Or is there one?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a reason. I'll just share a little bit of my story. When I wrote my first book, it wasn't really a calling. It was a necessity because I had a marketing company and I was working with small businesses. I wanted to break into the bed and breakfast industry, but I didn't have any clients at the time. And my business coach said, well, just write a book, put your techniques and everything, tailor it to their industry and write a book. And I decided, oh, okay, great idea. But I had no idea how to get started at the time. And this was in the October timeframe. The bed and breakfast industry had a big conference every year in January. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have my book ready to go. Little did I know how much work was involved. So I know we're going to talk about self-publishing versus traditional publishing later on in the conversation, but that was what started me on the self-publishing journey because I knew I could not get a book contract, an agent, or any of those things and have that book ready to go in January. So I ended up going down the self-publishing route. But to answer your question about how do you pick your topic, because we all have so much knowledge about so many different things. And I think both Charlotte and Dr. Tierney talked about where their passion is, right? What is the thing that, you are always talking about, right? People get tired of you saying, oh, this, that, the other thing about your particular subject. That is where you have the most knowledge. And that is where you should start because as Catrice said, there are people going through the same things that you're going through, but don't have the resources that you have or are not even aware of the resources. And so it's up to us when we're passionate about a subject to go ahead and share that with the world.
Sharing comes in a lot of different ways. And so I want to ask each of you this because there is this sort of pivot when you think about the writing is how do you balance what you want to say and the emotion of getting it out on paper. And I know I ask this because our viewers sometimes say, yeah, I've got a lot to say, but I may be judged by what I say. I want to share so much information, but I don't know how to, parcel it out. And that's where a good editor comes in. So I'm gonna go back to Linda before I come back to the rest of our guests. How do you select an editor? Or should you be able to edit your book, or is it just impossible to self-edit?
Absolutely not. And Catrice can tell you, I yelled at her a lot saying, don't edit, just get the ideas out of your head and onto your paper, onto computer, onto your laptop, whatever it is that you're using, because we are so close to our subject. We think we know what we want to say, and it comes out, but it may not come out the way somebody else can absorb that. And so it is critical to work with an editor to help you crystallize your thoughts and organize the chapters and make sure that what you want to say actually comes across in paper.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Catrice, talk about that for a moment, because you work with the coach, and I was going to tell you my editing story was horrifying because I'm like, and so Catrice, what was it like working with the coach to help you edit your process?
It helped tremendously. Just like Linda said, it was really the push of just get it on paper, by hook or crook, right? In some instances, it was driving down the highway and just having my cell phone on recording notes, just sharing. And then sometimes we would then take that information saying, okay, for the past, couple of weeks, here's all the content I created. I don't really know how to organize it, but these are the thoughts that were on my mind. This is information I wanted to share. And working with Linda, we were able to then kind of group the content in the appropriate ways. And then she would then ask follow-on questions, say, you started talking about this, but expand this topic area for us. And then that's what led me to creating even more information, resources, or even identifying perhaps, I may not be so knowledgeable about this area, but I know someone who specifically went through that particular issue. So let's get them in here and let's have them talk to that piece and then tie it together. So it really helped just to get everything out onto the cutting floor before it got cut.
The cutting floor before it got cut. So when we come back after the break, we're going to continue this conversation because, as you can tell, editing can not only be an amazing experience, and for some of you, it could be traumatic because they're your words. It's your heart on paper that you took the time. And so you're wondering why things happen the way they do. We'll talk more on this subject when we come back after the break.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. And as you can tell, this process of writing comes with some highs and some lows. And also, being an author is not for the thin-skinned. It is not for the faint of heart. Dr. Tierney, talk to us about being on the cutting floor and how do people manage their emotions when going through the process?
Yeah, I was hoping you was going to circle back to that, because before we get to the editing process, it's like you have to do your internal work. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if that thing still triggers a trauma response in you, you're not ready. You know, if you are so touchy about your work. I think it was Erica Badu that said, now keep in mind, I'm an artist. So I'm sensitive about my, okay? Like if that level of sensitivity is to the height where no one can give you constructive feedback. Now, I'm not talking about somebody that's just ripping, just writing up all the pages, red marks everywhere, and not giving you constructive feedback. But I'm talking about that constructive feedback that's actually meant to make you better. If you can't take that, if you can't take, the process of growth that inherently comes with writing, then you're not ready. You probably need to come and talk to me first, and let's work through some of these things, these internal things that you are trying to work through in the writing, but it's not quite coming out the way you want it to or think it should, because you still have some emotional blocks that we need to kind of walk through. We need to walk through some of the thought patterns or some of the habits that are still very present before you can really get that thing out on paper and help someone else. Because that writing process, sitting before an editor and like hearing the real raw about your writing, it can be hard, but it is very necessary if you are to have a polished product at the end that is going to make an impact.
Absolutely. I can concur with that. And all of us can say we like the finished product, that we have after we went through the process. Charlotte, you write both for children and for women and adults. Is the process different for you when it comes to the editing of what you want to say and could say? And then sometimes it's how you say it, because it's not like you're doing an album and we all can't do these burn records. So we need to really temper what we say and how we say it. What does that look like for you?
So, for me, writing children's books, it's a very short process for me because, I'm really, putting myself in the position of the child who I want to really read my book and the excitement that I want them to feel and all of the things. So for me, writing children's books are actually, people are like, why don't you just write children's books? Because they're actually easier for me to write. But at the same time, writing self-help books it's a more tedious process because not only is it more pages, but it's more emotion, it's more research, it's a lot. But I just want to circle back to this one thing too, because it's not, when it comes to managing, not in writing children's books and writing self-help books, there are two things that I have to do that really coincide with both of them. And it's one, I have to manage my emotions and I have to manage my level of expectation. And when I say that, it's because, I have to do my part, which is writing the story, right? Writing the book. But having a team of people, when you're not just the only one, I'm not my editor, I'm not my illustrator, I'm not, and I'm not just all of my editors either, because sometimes you need different editors for different things. And so once I do my part, it's like you can set a deadline or a date where you think your book is going to be done. And yet at the same time, even if I've done my part, if my illustrator needs more time, if my editor needs more time, then although I have set a date of November 14th, my book is coming out, I also have to manage my level of expectation to say, well, it just might not happen then. And I had to learn that early on when I wrote my first book, because I set a deadline, I set a timeline, I knew when I wanted that book to come out, but all of the pieces didn't fall together. And so I learned that one thing right there was managing my level of my emotions, but also managing my level of expectation. When it comes to writing self-help books, when my editor is reading it and, and she's telling me, okay, I think you should take this out, I think you should leave this in, then it really, it can be really emotional, because I can be like, well, I really wanted to share this part, but sometimes some things are not meant to be shared right then. And so sometimes it's the difference between writing a book right now and also being able to write a series of books that may go along with what that particular thing is that you're talking about. And there's an author that's really good about writing series. Her name is Valerie Burton, and she is so good about her themes of books. And so if you're like looking to look at somebody's work who writes series and, for different populations, she's a really good person to follow.
Thank you for sharing that, because we all need additional resources. I want to ask Linda this question because I think I know some of us are looking for agents, and I know if y'all are out there, you're trying to figure out, who do I go to? Who do I go to? Linda, what is the value and purpose of having a literary agent, and what are some of the publishing houses that people could consider for different genres?
Sure. Well, the value of having an agent is that person is going to shop your book around. They will help you create a book proposal, which is basically an outline of your book and what you plan to share with that and what the value is and who the audience is. And they'll help you shop that around to the different publishing houses. Now, the way that the publishing landscape has really changed a lot in the last few years, there's been a lot of consolidations, and we talk about the big 5 New York publishing houses. Those are the ones that put out all of the bestsellers and all of that. It's really, really difficult to get, as a first-time author, to get into one of those big publishing houses in New York, because we talked about this last week. There's over 2 million books that get written every year, and those publishers are out to make money, to make a profit. They're in business to make a profit, and so they're not going to be willing to take a chance on a first-time author because the metrics of it don't work out. On the other hand, there are a lot of smaller publishers, small presses, university presses, publishers that specialize in specific genres like Christian nonfiction or Christian fiction or children's fiction or business books. So there are a lot of publishers that focus on that, which is easier for you to get into. And then also there are what are called hybrid publishers, which is basically what we call a pay to play, right? So you pay them a fee and they will help you get your book published, and they will also take a portion of the profits from your book. And then finally, there's self-publishing where, as Charlotte said, you gather your own team of people, your coach, your editor, your illustrator, your book layout person, and you build your own team, and you self-publish on one of the various and sundry platforms such as Amazon. So I think the best way to get started is to do a search on your specific genre. So if it's Christian fiction or if it's business related leadership books, do a search for publishers in that category and then do your research on them. And there are a lot of key questions that we don't have time to go into today to ask. But, one of the things is, will you retain the rights to your book? Rights have been in the news a lot lately in the music industry, but it's also true in the publishing industry, because when you sign on and you get a book contract with a big 5 publishing house, what you're doing is you're selling them the rights or the intellectual property of your book. They then own that, and they pay you then a royalty based on how many books that they sell. But it also restricts you in that you can't sell everywhere. There's certain parameters of when you can sell and how you can sell, and also what your cover looks like, and even what the content of your book is. So they basically buy your intellectual property, and in return they give you this big distribution capability so that they can get your book out in every bookstore and all of that. So it is a trade-off, and you have to be conscious of that. So you want to ask whether you still own the rights. You want to ask, what is the royalty? Typically for a large publishing house, it's 10 cents on the dollar. So, if you're selling a book for $20, you're getting $2. Mm-hmm. And you also want to ask what marketing they do for you. Because I think that, again, first-time authors, they think, let me just hand everything over to a publisher and they're going to sell my book for me. They really don't. They are expecting you as an author to have a platform, to have a following, and to do your own marketing. They will handle distribution, but they don't really handle the demand, if you will, for your book.
Oh, I have so many questions right now. Because if you're a person who is looking for what they call, I'm gonna put this in quotes, book deal, and these publishers want to give you money for your book, you're beholden to this process of being able to have the time, the energy, and the resources yourself to be on the road, to go to book fairs, to go to book shows, to show up at Barnes and Noble or wherever it is they tell you that you need to do. And so for all of you ladies, think about that for a moment. If you've self-published your book, and you can, because I know we're going to go to a break in a minute, but I would like to know before we go into that break, because it's going to segue us into what we need to talk about next, is would you be willing to take the book that you have currently and sell it to a publishing house? Patrice?
No, especially given the piece about the intellectual property. No, that I own that IP, so I'm not willing to do that.
Okay, Charlotte?
I think it depends on which one of my books I'm talking about.
Okay, children's book or self-help?
I would probably do a children's book, but probably not a self-help.
Okay, Dr. Tierney?
Depends on the deal. I'm gonna just keep
Okay.
it. I'm gonna just keep it 100. It depends on the deal. It depends on what my attorneys can sit at the table and negotiate for me. Because I'm a big thinker. So when it comes to these intellectual properties and these rights, when Hollywood comes calling, I need all of that to come back to Dr. Tierney Enterprises. So it depends on what deal I can strike with them as to what I'll be selling.
Okay, I like that. So everybody, when we come back after the break, let's dive into what it means to pivot. You may have heard Linda say that you need a platform. So perhaps speaking is the route for you. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
They said the quiet part out loud. Black votes are a threat, so they erased them. After the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, Republican legislatures moved fast. New voter ID laws, polling place shutdowns, purges of black voters from the rolls. Trump's Justice Department didn't stop it, they joined in. In 2018, his DOJ backed Ohio's voter purge system, a scheme that disproportionately erased black voters. Their goal, erase black votes and political power. Yeah, that happened. These are the kinds of stories that we cover every day on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Subscribe on YouTube and download the Black Star Network app. Support fact-based independent journalism that centers African Americans and the issues that matter to our community.
Welcome back, everybody. And as you can tell, being an author requires you to not only put in the work, but to put on your thinking cap and determine how much you're willing to give away of yourself in this process of becoming an author. Whether you just want to put out a book because it's going to help other people, or are you trying to move into that space of bestseller? Well, a lot of that happens depending on the environment that you're in. So let's talk, ladies, about having this platform, because as coaches, we often tell people, perhaps you should be a speaker, because you really can't have a book and not be willing to at least do 1 or 2 book signings, know what you want to talk about, when you get there. So Charlotte, I want to start with you. In the speaking arena, and you've done television as well, let's talk about how do people get to that space and how do they parlay their works and expertise into opportunities of engagement?
That's a really, really great question. So when I first got into doing television and other media, like writing and doing podcasts and things like that, it really came about because I hired a publicist. And my publicist was she was my eyes and ears and finding me really good opportunities. Now, I have to tell you, just like anything else, getting a good publicist is very trial and error, because my first publicist was horrible. And I hope she's watching, just joking. But but she was so bad. Like, she threw me in without even kind of coaching me along the way. So I'll just never forget my first TV segment. Like I was just like, I got my hair and makeup done for this, like, because they were like, oh, I thought you'd done TV before, and all these other things. And they're like, I don't know if we're going to do this segment, but they asked me, did I think I could do it? And I was like, absolutely. Because, I spent all this time and effort and everything. And so I did it. But, if you have a really good publicist who really knows what they're doing and they're not just trying to take you for your money. And that's something else like Linda was talking about researching. Like you really have to research. You have to really check people's referrals and see their client, see if they would be willing to share some of their client list with you. Because my next publicist that I got, amazing. I mean, she was getting me on TV. She was getting me writing articles. She was getting me on different people's podcasts, and it wasn't just local TV, it was national TV. And so I really appreciated her for that. And I still do. And so she is part of my dream team, is what I like to call my team, because they're really the ones that help me to do the things that I do. But honestly, if you're not going to do the footwork yourself and you don't know what you don't know, like I know about writing a book, but I don't know about, getting, I don't know how to be a literary agent. I don't know how to be a publicist. I don't know how to be a graphic designer. So I pretty much stay in my lane. I help people. There are people who help me to learn different industries. But my thing is knowing what it is that you need. If you want speaking engagements, you probably want to find a publicist, or you probably want to join some groups. I joined mom groups. I joined some other groups that, are women in business groups and things of that nature. And I just put myself out there and I made myself known, and I couldn't be timid about it. And also recognizing, what my time limitations were, because, I'm a wife and I'm a mom and, I'm a business owner. And so just making sure that my team also knew my bandwidth, because my team was they're never going to put me in a situation that's going to take away from the main thing. And for me, keeping the main thing is what goes on within the confines of our house, my marriage, my children, my own emotional, mental well-being, and all of that. So just get your team tight.
Get your team tight. Let's talk about that for a moment. I want to pivot to Catrice, because her work relates to breast cancer and breast cancer awareness. And Catrice, even with your rare form of breast cancer that you experienced, where did you find your audience for your speaking, and how did you network and also utilize your author resource to be able to navigate this landscape?
So, Jacquie, where I found that network was just similar to what Charlotte said, joining some of those groups that have those same concerns that you believe your book may be able to answer. So it was different chat groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, being able to connect with different cancer organizations, both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. It was showing that I am a thought leader. So sometimes it was posting different comments, different threads, having awareness for different issues that were going on within this community. And as that information kept getting posted, you then acquire more and more people, perhaps followers, who are interested in what you have to say. And it was from there that I started getting emails or perhaps even direct messages on various social platforms, asking if I could either come speak on their podcasts, be featured in an article within their newspaper or their magazines, being featured in other publications, national publications, and even just because of my connections, even with this small niche of individuals who have been diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer, there was a push at a national level to create more awareness. And it was for that reason that I was featured on Good Morning America. So it just was a slow kind of buildup of connecting with that community. And that community, as you know, although we might be small, the cancer community is large. So many of us either have it or are touched by it. And so I think that's kind of how it grew.
I like what you said about that, because it's hard to find your tribe sometimes. And oftentimes in our passion work, we do find like-minded people who are able to give us direction and guidance for the things that we need in order to push us forward. Linda, this push forward in the space of being a speaker, And I'm asking you and Dr. Tierney this question because sometimes people have a lot to say and they want to put it in a book. How can you take what you can't put in a book and then also create a speaking platform or opportunity for you to say those things that maybe got, on the axe floor, the cutting floor, if you will, in the editing process? Linda, speak to that for a moment, and then I'm gonna come to Dr. Tierney.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you came back to me, Dr. Jacquie, because, there's a lot that, as you say, gets left on the cutting floor that maybe you don't want to put in your book, but you still want to talk about in your speaking. And so one of the things that I work with my clients on is creating a media kit. Right. Mm-hmm. And that media kit not only contains pictures, like headshots and pictures of your book and description of your book, but it also contains questions, like 10 questions that someone that books you on a podcast or books you at an event can ask, so that you're doing the work for them. And you're also structuring the conversation, right? Instead of them just coming up with random questions, you can provide them questions. So you're saving them work, but then you're also steering them in the direction that you want to go. And there's a lot of things that you can say, just in casual conversation or as part of your speaking that you might not have wanted to put in a book. And that's a good way to do it, is to focus in on those questions in your media kit that can steer the conversation that way. And I want to just tack on to what Catrice said about finding your tribe and finding your niche. And someone else touched on it earlier. You have to put yourself out there. You can't just write your book and then put it on a shelf and think that people are going to come and buy it, because they're not. You have to put yourself out there on social media and post about your book and about topics related to your book. And I like to tell people, tie it into the calendar. We're going to be showing this podcast in October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So in the case of Catrice, where her book is about that, it's a perfect opportunity for her to have posts about breast cancer, not even necessarily about her book, but just as she said, establishing herself as a thought leader in this space. And then people are going to be naturally attracted to her.
Dr. Tierney.
Yeah. To be perfectly honest, everyone has pretty much given all of the tips and tools and techniques and what you can do. And yeah, I co-sign on everything that my esteemed colleagues have already mentioned, where this topic is concerned. I want to go in a little different direction and tell you about the importance of luck. Okay. And for us believers of the blessings. All right. Because a lot of times we can do all the things. We've done all the things. We've got the coach. We have the proposal. We have, went after the speaking platform. We've been building our social media and all the things, right? There is still an element that only God can open that door. Mm-hmm. That only, being at the right place at the right time, where you were supposed to be in alignment when that blessing dropped, for that connection, for that door to open. That is still a very real element. Just to give you an example, me being on this show right now was a product of that. I did all the hard work. I had this, this book that I didn't know what to do with. And I was literally on the phone with my mom, walking my dog. And we were having a very mundane conversation. And she said, yeah, your dad went to go play golf with Roland Martin. And she just kept talking. And I can't tell you to this day what she was talking about. Stopped. Wait, did you say Pops was playing golf with Roland Martin? Not the same Roland Martin that I listened to every morning during that monster commute when I was living in DC and was working at the Department of Education. That Roland Martin, the Roland Martin that on Periscope and on the radio station, and that, wait a minute, hold on, time out, rewind that back. How did he go play golf with Roland Martin? Well, Davina is friends with his wife. Davina, who was the wedding coordinator for my wedding, knows Roland Martin's wife. And they happen to be in Memphis during the St. Jude Golf Classic. Okay, wait a minute. And my mom was just floored, like, duh, Tierney. I mean, Davina, like this connection, but I didn't even know this connection was in my backyard. God did not reveal that connection to me until I had did what he told me to do and wrote that book. And when I talked to Davina gave me the number for Dr. Jacquie, and what was supposed to be an hour conversation turned into a 3-hour conversation, turned into connection, turned into me sitting right here talking to you right now. So there are things that I could not have worked my way into that connection. When, the news called me, they called me because they were looking for someone, and I had all of my ducks in a row, and I made it easier for them to contact me because I had did the work, but I could not have forced that, that phone call. So there are some elements, Sugar, that I need you to understand that we have to do our part. Absolutely. We have to make sure that we have our things together, that we have been obedient and we've written the book. We have the 10 questions. We have the media kit. We have all the things. But then there's a part where you have to just stand and you have to pray and you have to say, okay, Lord, I've done what you told me to do. Can you open this door? Can you make that connection? Tell me what it is that you want me to do, and sit back and watch him do what only he can do that you can do.
We're going to hold that thought, because when we come back after the break, let's talking about that. There's a popular song that says, he's opening doors for me. Do you have the courage to walk in? We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
Welcome back, everybody. And as you can tell, it takes all of us to be all in our own process when it relates to putting in the work, to being an author, to being a speaker, to finding your tribe, to moving yourself out there in these public spaces. So let's talk about that, ladies, for a moment, because faith plays a very big part, not only in how we move through our journey, but also the doors that we select to walk through, because it can be difficult sometimes. And I'm going to start with Charlotte on this one. Charlotte, it can be difficult sometimes to know which doors God is opening, because there's so many people in our ear and we've got so many thoughts in our head that sometimes it's hard to quiet the chatter. How do we get there?
How do we get there? We get there by really taking the time to really just pray about it. And when I say pray about it, some people are like, oh, I need to pray on it. No, sometimes people use prayer because they have the paralysis of analysis. But I'm really talking about praying about it, to asking the Lord, really, Lord, is this what you want me to do? Is this a good opportunity? A great opportunity, but it doesn't really matter if it's not a God opportunity. And so for me, when I first started out and people were asking me to do things, I always thought, oh, well, if I don't say yes, then I'm going to miss out. I had, FOMO. And, but when I really started growing in my journey is when I learned how to say no, because, and I think that's what really started, positioning me even more as an expert, because people they not only valued the information that I was giving, but they also understood if I said no, if I knew I couldn't do something right then, and I could say to them, well, you know what, I can't do this right now because my schedule won't allow for it, but maybe next time. Once I got to that place where I was like, you know what, I am valuable, my yes is valuable, and my no is valuable, then it shifted me, but it really started shifting me in the spaces and places. And when people asked me to do something, And I really appreciate that so much. But saying, really praying about it and asking the Lord, and also bouncing and having a network of people to really kind of like bounce things off of, people who really want to see you win, but also being unafraid of not saying yes to every opportunity.
FOMO is real. That for people who are watching who don't know what FOMO stands for, it is fear of missing out. And like she said, not every opportunity is your opportunity. Dr. Tierney, talk to us about that from a coaching perspective, because people oftentimes, I can get you this or I can do that for you. And we're like, please, sir and ma'am.
Yeah. My mom used to say it this way: not all money is good money.
That's right.
Okay. Because it might be a shiny opportunity, but you don't know the hell that come with it. You don't know the back end, of that blessing. And so a lot of times we're just looking for the blessing, but you got to ask yourself, am I equipped to carry the back end of that blessing? And this is not just in the author world. You could think like, oh, I'm supposed to go to this, this company right here and get this new job. And you don't know that maybe within a month of you being there, that company might shut down, so you might need to stay where you at, sugar, and so this is where making sure that we are very in tune with our spiritual guide, making sure that we are really asking the hard questions. We're not just looking at the shiny new thing, and something that may be for me may not be for you. This may be my time. This may be, the season that God has me in for me to walk into that thing, where you may be in a completely different season. You may still be in a season of preparation and preparing and pruning, where now it's time for me to walk out, this whole thing. And so I think a lot of times, particularly with social media, we will compare our year 1 to someone else's year 5. We will compare our year 5 to someone else's year 20, and so making sure that we are being very intentional to keep our eyes on our own paper, and that helps us to not get caught up in the charlatans, that'll come and want to sell us this get rich quick, or, oh, we can get your books and all the things. And we're so hung up on that we're not asking the questions that, that we really need to, that can ultimately save us a lot of grief, down the road. Okay. And I'm not just saying this is, because I've written 2 books, or no, I'm still in the process. So I just told you the story of how I got here, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a there that I'm, walking towards right now. So as I say that, sugar, if you are watching and you are a literary agent, or a literary agent, I am sitting on a series, sugar, 3 whole new books that I am looking for an agent. Okay. So yeah, call me, send us a message, because I need to get these new books out into the world. So again, just making sure that you are asking the tough questions and looking at everything with a sober mind, and not just going after everything shiny.
Can I add to that really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to add to this too. If something goes against your character and your integrity, and something goes, and if it just doesn't feel right to you deep down in your shanana, and it's going to go against even the character of God, then it really is a no. Like, no matter what it looks like, no matter how it sounds like, no matter how much money somebody's trying to give you, you really should not be doing it, because you will regret it so bad. And let me just say, I'm going to share this really quick story. So, as our family has grown, like when our family was growing from like 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, and even now, I kid you not, like every year I get about 3 or 4 different calls from people for our family to do reality TV. And every time, and it kind of goes back previously to what we were talking about, how much are you willing to give away? So there was a person who called me up and asked me about doing a reality show with our family. And their premise of the show was, I was the mom that was doing all things mom, running the household, doing this, whatever. But they really wanted my husband to be, the picture that they had of my husband was that he really was an absentee father. And that completely, first of all, it against everything that my family stands for, because my husband, if you know him, he is very present in the lives of our children. No matter how hard he works outside of our home, he is very present. He goes to games. He does all the things. He takes people to practice and things like that. And so I just wasn't willing to do it. I wasn't willing to have cameras be in certain places that were intimate spaces as it pertained to the lives of my children, because my children weren't going to be small forever. And even though, I have kids who are emerging adults, there are certain things that they just don't want to share. So I say all that to say, if it goes against your character, your integrity, if it goes against the character of God, or whoever your inner whatever is, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good advice. And I want to pop over to Catrice for that, because I know Catrice was doing her little God wink, wink, wink over there, because sometimes God winks at us, doesn't he, Catrice, to say, when is your time and when is your season? What role does discernment play in this process of putting yourself out there? Because once you become an author, a speaker, you start utilizing social media, you get all kinds of followers of different types.
Mm-hmm.
So true. That God winks piece. I heard Dr. Tierney talk about, being in alignment, and we talked about moms, and moms are a special part of that team to kind of help you with some of the discernment at times. And it was actually during my cancer journey that my mother introduced me to a book called God Winks. And it was just talking about the different stories about how, you might be along a certain path, but there's something that happens that veers you a different way, or that was the place you're supposed to be. And I know myself, there have been instances where I felt like, well, is this really the path you want me to be on, God? Is my voice still something that needs to be heard? Do people need to hear me? And there have been instances, as a result, I've taken a pause. But then there'll be a message, an email, a DM that comes in asking for more, asking for me to come speak, asking for me to lend my voice to this community. And so I look at those as God winks, and ensuring that, yes, I am in alignment. It helps with that discernment, having those answers about whether or not I'm taking the right next steps.
Those right next steps really do matter. And Linda, I'm going to ask you this question because I'm reflecting on my own journey into this process, because I've been talking about balance for, 30, 40 years now. And people are like, oh, work-life balance is not achievable. And I'm like, there's more to it than that. A lot of it is the power of the mind. And now we're in this space of mental health. And sometimes you just have to wait. Some things can be written in their season. Some things can be written ahead of their time. But even in all of that, what is the power in waiting and listening, Linda? How important is that to know that when God say go, you go, and when God say wait, you wait?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Dr. Tierney talked about it a little bit earlier, saying that if you're still in a season where you are working through some things, this may not be the time for you to write a book. And I have a client right now whose project is on hold because her book is about bullying in the workplace, where she was very severely bullied. And she is still very, very angry about it. She started writing her book and she was just so angry she couldn't even continue writing. So I said, look, let's just pause. Let's pause, let you work through some things, and then we'll come back to it when it's the right season, as Dr. Tierney said. And I think everybody has said the same thing, is that a lot of times you just have to be quiet and listen, and God will tell you whether it's the right time for you to move or not. And it's okay if you need to take a pause and not write for a while and then come back to it after you've done the work to get your act together, then it's all perfectly fine, because I firmly believe there's a season for everything. And this may not be the season for you to get this book out. Maybe this is the season to work on yourself and get yourself through these things. And then next season will be the time to put your book out.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing. When we come back after the break, I'll give my reflection.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm giving my reflection now because I think it's important that we all begin to understand the value and importance of what it means to put in the work to not only be a writer, but to also be a speaker. Sometimes we're tossed into these environments and we haven't counted the cost. So as you have heard, there are many things that you may need to consider. Where are you emotionally? And are you ready to write? Have you manifested in some way these things that will help you put good content in so that people who will read your book will not only understand what you need to do, but also they will be able to get something from it that will move their lives forward. As you prepare on this journey of being an author or speaker, just know that you're required to put in the work and you have to be all in, mind, heart, body, and soul. Thank you all for watching. Bye now.